Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm early today. Usually, if you all know me, I'm Dr. Maisha, and I typically do these lives, on in the afternoon. And yet today, I wanted to come on a little bit early because I have some things in my mind and I wanted to bring them to you. One of the things I was thinking about is the fact that our listening drives our response and our communication. Now, I'd say over the last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, I've been doing several trainings, organizational type trainings, and then of course, the beginning of the month, I just finished. We just finished our last NLP certification, coach certification, and one of the things that has kept coming up as a theme is how our listening drives our communication. How it's the first opportunity that we have to begin to refine the potential for our responses and our reactions. So, as I was doing this training yesterday, I was just, speaking about how we usually listen. You by now you probably have heard me talk about this, but if you haven't, you know that most of our listening is geared towards right and wrong. We listen to agree or disagree. We listen to validate or invalidate. We listen for what's good or what's bad. We listen in a very binary manner. And when we listen that way, it really does have us miss a lot of the communication. And so, when we think about ways that we can begin to expand our listening, and why that's important is because, well, when we're listening, when we're the information that's coming at us, and you all know this if you've watched my TEDx talk, you've heard me talk about this many times before. The information that's coming at us is 11 million bits of information per second. So we got all this information coming at us, and we're filtering it down, we're filtering it down, and we're filtering it down. So we're always filtering information through our own personal experiences, our beliefs, our values, our upbringing. We're always filtering information in this way, and that gives us the emotion, that gives us our internal dialogue, our self-talk, and that's what we respond from. Now, of course, if we think about there's filters that we can change and there's filters that we can't change. And obviously the filters that we can't change are our upbringing. We can't change the past. We can't change our past experience. We can't change, our upbringing. But what we can do is we can begin to manipulate our beliefs, our values, expand our beliefs, expand our values, expand our sense of self identity, expand our sense of purpose. And so all we're doing in essence is when we expand these things, when we expand our listening, then we expand our capacity to be flexible in communication. And that's a lot of what I teach my students and coach in the NLP trainings and the NLP coaching is how do you be flexible with your communication? And what do I even mean by that? How is it that in any given situation you can navigate no matter what obstacles are thrown your way? In any given conversation, you can have the most centered and purposeful response, and guide any conversation to a I would say a win-win, or a the most desirable outcome for the circumstance. And it might not always be the desirable outcome, but it would be like for that moment, right? And so how do you do that? And part of it is by expanding the listening. And I'll give you an example. um, I was having a conversation with the other day with in a meeting with a team member, a colleague that I was doing some consulting with inside of an organization. And a question came up specifically about um, our billing and our invoicing. And what was interesting about the question is there seemed to be some angst around, how we allocate our hours and what was included. And it could have been taken any number of ways, right? There could have been, I could have had a listening for, oh, this person's questioning how we're using our hours, or oh, this person is questioning our value, or oh, this person's questioning, you know, my integrity, right? I could have had it, like depending on the filters that were in place, it could have any one of those reactions or responses. And with the like, one of the things I teach is 3 positions of listening. You listen through your own eyes, you listen through the other person's eyes, and then you listen from an observer point of view, right? Big picture. So as this person is speaking to me and asking, giving the reasons that, hey, Dr. Lulu, giving all the reasons that for the questions they have, explaining it. What I'm doing is I'm listening. And I'm listening from my perspective, but I'm also listening from, well, what could be their perspective? And what could be the bigger picture here, right? So I'm getting curious rather than shutting down my listening through the lenses of, well, I don't agree with that, or he's wrong about that, or this and that and the other. Rather than shutting down the listening, I expand my listening by getting curious. So I'm leaning in. And what is the thing that we do when we get curious? We ask more questions. So I ask questions to expand my understanding and to get what is the deeper meaning? What is the deeper concern here? Because oftentimes, oftentimes the triad of listening, that's right, Dr. Lulu. Oftentimes when we are oftentimes when we're listening, we're just listening from that one perspective. And oftentimes when people have a concern or a complaint, the first concern or complaint that comes out of their mouth is not the actual concern or complaint, right? So sometimes the actual concern is deeper. And in order to get to that wider, that bigger concern, we have to be willing to ask questions. We have to be willing to be curious about what's going on. And that requires us getting out of our minds and getting over there with the other person. Position number 2, looking through their eyes. So in essence, as I asked the question, I got to the bigger concern, which is, well, this person was wondering about our invoicing and wondering about the details of our hours because they were wanting to advocate for the budget that we're proposing for the next round of our consulting. And having gotten to that, they have to be able to explain these things to the board. Now, that's completely different from, oh, they're questioning my integrity. Oh, they're questioning my worth, or they're questioning my whatever, right? That's completely different from that. But by expanding, getting from one position to the other position to the bigger picture, and then being curious and asking questions, and also asking, what is his role? What is his role in the organization? Like, what's the real bigger picture of what this could mean? And so, by doing that, I was able to hear that deeper concern and respond from that place. And yes, the pause is so important. We often only listen for the pause because we're listening to respond, because we're listening to judge, to assess, to invalidate or validate. And so when we're listening to understand, when we're leaning in and we're listening to understand, it allows us to really expand that listening. And that takes practice, and it can be taught and it can be learned. Our brains are machines. We're automatic, meaning making, um, you know, listening, non-listening, listening to judge machines, right? That's what we are. Our brains are going to do what our brains are going to do. And the key is to begin to catch ourselves in the act of how we listen, to catch ourselves in the act of listening so that we know, well, are we listening in a way that's shutting down the conversation or shutting down possibility? Are we listening in a way that's opening up possibility, right? Opening up the possibility of, well, there's a deeper concern that I can lean into. Opening up the possibility that it doesn't mean what you think it means. And that takes, yes, practice and patience and um, and even self-compassion, but also compassion for the person who's speaking. So these are some of the things that I'm often teaching in organizations, but this is also something that I practice with, say, my son. He's when he has a complaint because he's 8 and 8-year-olds have complaints. Right. And then sometimes I have to like tweak my ears. You have a radio, and then there's like you got to tune the radio to get the station real clear, right? You got to tune that radio so that you're not hearing all the static, and the static is the complaint. And then when you start to really fine tune, then you can hear, oh, this is the real message. This is the real complaint. This is the real concern. And then when you can get the real concern, then you can address the real concern, whatever that might be, whether it's with your child, whether it's with a colleague, whether it's with a spouse. And it's interesting because in my last training, this is one of the big first lessons. So when I teach my certification programs, when I teach the neurolinguistic programming trainings and certifications, the very first day is that foundation. We spend like almost an entire day and a half on refining our listening, and then being able to elicit or like ask questions to get the deeper structure so that we can have the deeper listening, get even more listening than what's really being thrown at us. And so that first day in the last training, one of my students really got a huge breakthrough in her relationship with her husband, because what she realized is that she had been listening like the way her husband was communicating. That was a way that was that she was communicating with her husband in a way that he couldn't hear, and he was communicating in a way that she couldn't hear, and it was all because they have different mental models of what they were saying, different mental models of their world. So different mental models of words coming out of their mouth, which means they were communicating like this, like two ships passing in the night. They were not communicating with each other. They were communicating over and under each other. And so in understanding that and learning how to ask the questions and tweak and adjust the responses, the listening, so that she could tweak and adjust the response, since the training, like I've been checking in with them, like their communication has been amazing. And that just happened in the very first day. Refining the listening is so powerful. And a lot of times when we talk about expanding our communication, learning communication, that people want to jump to, how do you communicate? How do you speak? What's your question, Dr. Lulu? How do you speak? How do you say things a particular way and influence? But before you can do that, you have to listen. Before you can navigate any conversation with mastery, you have to master the listening. And that comes with a few assumptions, places that you can stand. And again, I teach that in the training, and I've brought some of them here in live, and maybe I'll bring a couple back, but that comes from being able to stand in a different place. So that is the big thing that I wanted to share today. I know that Dr. Lulu has a question. The role of love languages in the relationship conversation. Such a really good question, Dr. Lulu. I think there's like a whole segment I can do on that. But I think the role of love languages is this. When we talk about, remember I talked about models of the world just a moment ago. We all hold different models of the world. So in the world of love languages, we all have a different way that we receive, or we receive love. And oftentimes we tend to communicate love in the way that we receive it, not in the way that it is that the other person receives it. And so the beauty or the relevance of love language in relationship and communication is that if you understand the model of how a person receives love, their model of the world when it comes to love, if you understand that, then you can communicate, and they understand yours as well. They will refine their listening so that the things that you do when you're speaking your love language, it can actually hear it. Similarly, if they know your love language, they can practice surfing. So like when we understand other people's model of the world, we can step into it. We can practice speaking into other people's model of the world. Similarly, when people understand our model, our mental models, then they can actually hear us better because they can make those fine-tune adjustments, right? Remember the radio dial. So when a person understands your model of the world, that's why communication is so important. And when you understand another model of the world and you both are willing to listen and fine tune your listening, you can actually hear each other better. So that's where love languages comes into it. And that's a really, really great question. So I may end up coming back and doing a segment on love languages. And you're so welcome. Thank you for the question live. And, you know, you guys, if you want to really learn to refine your listening, and I'm talking about listening, we're talking about right now listening and communication with others, but there's a whole nother segment that I'm going to do on our internal voice and mastering that internal voice. In fact, I did say that I was going to have another 5-day challenge. I'm going to be announcing the date soon. It's coming up right after Thanksgiving. So make sure you stay tuned. I'll be posting that very, very soon. I want you to jump into the 5-day challenge. But if you really want to refine your listening, expand your listening, and expanding your listening is useful in all kinds of contexts, definitely in your personal relationships with your children, in your job, in your business, with your clients. If you want to expand that listening so that you can begin to learn mastery of the communication, like taking it that one step further, then you might consider being in our next upcoming NLP training in January. Also, we have one coming in April. So if that's the case, you can go to the website you see here and book a call with me, and or message me directly in LinkedIn or on Facebook or wherever you are, and I will look forward to talking with you. So until the next time, you all have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week. Namaste.